The late
Uncle,
afternoon sun
can you be
melted
my
into a
dad
soft
for a day?
bronze haze across the quiet streets of Willow Bend. As Dylan Hart, a 38-year-old former Marine with storm-gray blue eyes and sun-tanned skin, tightened the strap of the tool bag he carried from his truck. His broad shoulders, wrapped in a worn red-gray flannel over a black t-shirt, shifted with the steady rhythm of a man who had long learned to move quietly through the world. His boots, tan and scratched from years of service and months of odd jobs, crunched softly on the gravel. He had just returned home, an old cabin he'd slowly repaired with his own hands, when he heard footsteps. Not adult footsteps, not deliberate or heavy, but frantic, stumbling, uneven, and coming fast. Before he could fully turn, a small body collided into him with the force of desperation. Tiny arms wrapped around his waist as if she had found the edge of a cliff and refused to let go. He froze. Mia Turner, 8 years old, thin as a reed, her brown hair tied with a stretched-out rubber band, pressed her face into his shirt. Dirt streaked her cardigan, one button missing, and her pink cotton dress was torn at the hem. Her feet were bare, the skin on her heels raw from running. Her right knee had a bleeding scrape, the kind that came from falling on pavement rather than dirt. Her breath came in jagged bursts, each trembling inhale scraping the inside of her small chest. Dylan didn't move yet. He didn't want to frighten her. He only lowered his voice and said, Hey, what's going on?" Before she could answer, Bravo, his 4-year-old German shepherd, circled them with a low, alert bark. The dog's sable black and gray coat shimmered in the dimming light, the bright, broken arrow-shaped marking on his chest rising and falling with each breath. The dog didn't bristle in aggression. Instead, he lowered his head and sniffed Mia's hand, letting out a whine Dylan had only heard when Bravo recognized a scent tied to fear or sadness. That meant something. That meant everything. Mia lifted her face. Her eyes, green, wide, shimmering with terror, locked onto Dylan's. Tears streaked down her dusty cheeks. She tried to speak once, failed, tried again. Can you? Her throat tightened. Can you be my dad? Just for one day? The world seemed still. Even the wind paused. Dylan's pulse thudded once, heavy like an old door slamming inside his chest. He knelt slowly so he could meet her eye to eye. Her small fingers twisted in the fabric of his shirt as if letting go meant drowning. "Mia," he said gently, "slow down. Tell me what happened." She shook her head hard as if she couldn't, or didn't dare. Her small shoulders shook. Instinct took over, the instinct of a Marine who had pulled trembling children from rubble, and the instinct of a man who knew what loneliness looked like because he'd lived with it in silence. He lifted her easily into his arms. "Let's get you inside first, sweetheart." His cabin smelled faintly of cedar and fresh coffee. He placed her on the old but clean sofa, noticing how she sat on the edge like she was used to not taking up space. Her backpack, blue canvas, torn in one corner, slid from her shoulder and fell open on the floor. Inside were crumpled worksheets, a broken pencil, and a single photograph. Mia, with a woman whose smile looked warm enough to soften the edges of the world. Dylan picked up the picture carefully. "This your mom?" Mia nodded, lips trembling. She was the nicest person on earth. Her voice cracked on the last word. He sat beside her, but kept a small, respectful distance. Bravo lay at her feet, head on her knee, as if claiming her as someone who needed protection. The dog's breathing steadied, syncing with hers. That too meant something. Dylan noticed faint bruises along her arms, old ones yellowing, new ones purple-blue. His jaw tightened. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's not like that. I mean, Yes, sometimes. But it's not because they hate me. Her breath shuddered. It's because they think it's my fault. Your fault? Dylan asked softly. Mia stared at her scraped knee. My mom died because she saved me. She didn't sob. She didn't crumble. She said it like a confession she'd carried for years. When I was little, she whispered, I was running after a ball and didn't see the car. Mom pushed me out of the way. She got hit instead. She choked on air. Daddy used to love me so much before. But after that, every time he looked at me, it was like he saw the moment she died. Her hands trembled in her lap. He doesn't hurt me all the time. Just when he drinks. And he drinks a lot. And I try to be good. I promise. I try so hard. I make dinner. I clean. I get A's at school sometimes. I try to remind him of the mom he loved. But he says it hurts to look at me. Dylan's chest pulled tight in a way no battlefield injury had ever done. Bravo lifted his head and pressed it against Mia's leg, as if anchoring her to something safe and warm. She stroked his fur with shaking fingers, a small smile flickering through her tears. He's the only one who likes me. At school, it wasn't better. She explained in a small whisper how other children mocked her, calling her the girl who killed her mom, shoving her into lockers, stealing her lunch. Tomorrow is Hero Day, she said. Everyone brings someone. Someone they look up to. Everyone but me. She swallowed hard, lifting her gaze to him again. I saw you last week when you helped Mrs. Carter fix her steps. You talked nice. And Bravo, he liked me. Her lip trembled. So I thought maybe you could pretend to be my dad, just for a day. I won't ask again. I just don't want to be the only one sitting alone. Just then Bravo stiffened. His ears shot up. A low growl vibrated in his chest, but it wasn't aimed at Mia. It was aimed at the front door. Dylan stood, his instincts sharpened. Someone had been there. He stepped outside but saw only fading footprints in the dirt, fresh, adult-sized, leading away fast. Someone had followed the girl. Someone had seen her run here. Bravo nudged the prints, then looked up at Dylan, eyes fierce. Something, or someone, was coming. Inside, Dylan returned to Mia, softening his voice again. Listen to me, he said. Your mother did not die because of you. She died saving you because she loved you. And love like that doesn't disappear. From heaven, she watches over you every single day. She sees your kindness. She sees your strength. And she would want you to be loved, not punished. Mia's tears fell quietly, but they were different tears now, tears of release. Bravo licked her hand and curled against her side. Dylan took a slow breath. If you want me there tomorrow, I will be there. Her eyes widened, hope blooming like dawn rising over storm clouds. Really? Really, he said. You deserve someone in your corner. Bravo gently pressed his forehead against Mia's shoulder, a silent seal of promise, as if the dog himself accepted her into their small, broken, healing family. And for the first time in a long time, Mia Turner smiled like a child who believed miracles might still come. If this story touched your heart, Dylan murmured into the quiet room as if speaking to anyone listening. Remember, God still works through the hands of those who show up. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us share more stories of faith, healing, and unexpected grace. The morning of Hero Day broke with a pale, hopeful light that seemed almost too gentle for the storms Mia Turner had lived through. Dylan Hart had been awake since dawn, polishing the worn buckle of his old Marine belt as if the act itself steadied his mind. His flannel shirt was traded today for something cleaner, something meant to honor the moment. A crisp, olive-green utility shirt tucked into dark trousers, boots polished for the first time in months. He looked both like a soldier returning from memory and a man stepping toward a purpose he didn't yet fully understand. His jawline was freshly shaved, revealing the quiet strength carved from years of discipline. In the corner, Bravo sat perfectly still, wearing his faded black harness, the one he had used during his active K-9 service. The bright, broken arrow marking on his chest stood out sharply under the morning light. Even though he was no longer a working dog, he carried himself with the presence of one. Focused, alert, protective. When Dylan finished dressing, Bravo rose, walked to him, and nudged his hand as if saying, "We're ready." When Mia stepped out of the bathroom, her hair brushed carefully, her pink dress smoothed as best as she could, Dylan's breath tightened. The bruises on her arms were fading, covered partly by her beige cardigan. But her eyes, those green, fragile eyes, held something new today. A thin, trembling ribbon of hope. "You look wonderful," Dylan said softly, and Mia lowered her gaze shyly, clutching her backpack straps. Bravo walked to her immediately, sitting beside her knee like a guardian assigned by heaven. Their walk to school was quiet but full. Mia kept glancing up at Dylan every few steps, as if checking whether he was truly real, truly beside her, truly here for her. Dylan noticed the red marks on her feet, where yesterday's frantic running had cut the skin, and he slowed his pace. When they reached the school gates, voices rose instantly. Children pointed, some parents stood straighter, some teachers touched their hands to their chests when they saw the tall Marine-like figure walking with a little girl who clung to his hand like a lifeline. And then, the whispers started. "That's Mia Turner. Who's that with her? Is that a soldier? Look, is that his dog? He looks like a real military one. Maybe he's here for Hero Day with her." For the first time since losing her mother, Mia wasn't invisible. She wasn't a shadow in the hallway. She wasn't the girl people avoided. But then, like a bad memory stepping into sunlight, Brandon Walker appeared. 9 years old, blonde hair spiked up, wearing a navy hoodie with a baseball emblem on it, the self-appointed king of the third-grade jungle. He was flanked by 2 boys, Ethan Price and Kyle Monroe, both smirking with the nasty ease of children who had never been corrected at home. Brandon crossed his arms. "Look who suddenly has a hero," he sneered, stepping directly into Mia's path. "What did you do? Beg someone to pretend to like you?" Mia stiffened. Her fingers tightened painfully on Dylan's hand. Dylan's posture didn't change, but his gaze sharpened, landing on Brandon with the calm authority that made even adults reconsider their choices. But Bravo moved first. The German shepherd stepped ahead of Dylan, placing himself between Mia and the boys, body rigid, ears forward, tail low and controlled. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply released a low, warning growl that rolled from his chest like distant thunder. Brandon froze. His confident smirk faltered, and his feet shuffled backward instinctively. Even he could recognize that this dog, this creature of discipline and scars and silent duty, was not one to be tested. Dylan placed a hand on Bravo's neck, grounding him. "It's okay, boy," he murmured. He looked at the children, his voice firm but calm. "Hero Day is about respect. Maybe start with that." The boys backed away without another word. Just as they moved down the hallway, Bravo stopped abruptly. His nose lifted, sniffing the air with sharp, frantic pulls. He turned his head toward the school fence outside, toward a figure Dylan barely caught sight of before it slipped away. A man, dark jacket, Shoulders slumped, moving fast. Bravo growled, deep and uneasy, pressing close to Mia's leg. Dylan felt a chill crawl slowly down his spine. Someone had been watching her again, watching them. Inside the classroom, the atmosphere shifted entirely. Parents filled every seat in the back row, uniforms, suits, scrubs, aprons. Everyone dressed in the colors of their work and their pride. Nicholas Edward Reed's father, a pilot with an impeccable white uniform, stood tall with his polished boots. Brianna Holt's mother, a police officer with sharp brown eyes, adjusted her badge. Every student had someone. Everyone except Mia, until today. When Dylan entered with her hand clasped in his, the room fell silent. Completely silent. Mrs. Peterson, the warm-faced teacher in her mid-40s with soft curls of blonde hair and kind, tired blue eyes, pressed a hand to her chest. She had seen the bruises on Mia for months. She had tried to ask questions, but Mia always smiled too fast, shook her head too hard. Seeing the girl walk in now, head held slightly higher, cheeks flushed with something close to pride, brought tears instantly. Dylan took his place at the front after the previous parent finished. He set his hands behind his back with practiced posture, but his voice, when he spoke, was quiet, deep, and warm. My name is Dylan Hart. I served in the United States Marine Corps for many years. Today, I'm here because a very brave little girl asked me to stand with her. All eyes turned to Mia. She almost shrank into her seat, but then glanced at Bravo in the corner. The dog's steady presence held her upright. Dylan continued, People think strength is about muscles or medals or how loud you can shout. But real strength, real courage, is choosing kindness when life gives you every reason to be angry. It's standing up again after being knocked down, not because someone told you to, but because someone up there, he pointed upward gently, believes you still have purpose. Some parents began wiping tears. A mother with dark hair and olive skin whispered, Amen. Dylan told a short story, not of battles overseas, not of trauma, but of redemption. Even a soldier can lose his way, he said. But people like Mia remind me that we can be good again, that we can try again, that we can start again. The room erupted with applause. Mia's face glowed with a smile she'd tried to remember for years, but had forgotten how to make. Even Brandon stared, unable to summon any cruelty when the entire class seemed wrapped in warmth. But underneath the celebration, a shadow still lingered in Mia's world. And outside the classroom, someone else still watched. At the end of the presentation, Dylan rested a hand gently on Mia's back. You did great, he whispered. And for the first time, the weight she carried seemed just a little less unbearable. If this story touched your heart, Dylan said quietly as they stepped into the sunlight, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. God's miracles often begin with the smallest acts of kindness. The walk home after Hero Day was quieter than the journey that morning, but not heavy. Mia held Dylan's hand with the timid confidence of a child who had spent too long believing she didn't deserve to hold anyone's hand at all. Her steps were small but steady, and every so often she turned toward Dylan as if to confirm he was still beside her. Bravo walked at their other side, tail low but relaxed, his ears rotating subtly every time Mia sniffed or shifted, monitoring her mood like a living barometer. When they reached the small, aging Turner house, a single-story home with chipped paint and a sagging front porch, Mia slowed. The yard was cluttered with an overgrown lawn and a rusted mailbox, and there was something lonely about the drawn curtains, even in the daylight. She squeezed Dylan's hand without realizing it. Dad might be home. she murmured, her voice wavering. Sometimes he sleeps in. Sometimes he's not in a good mood. Dylan didn't say anything at first. He noticed the dent in the front door, the half-crushed beer cans beside the porch steps, the faint smell of stale alcohol lingering underneath the cleaner scents of pine and dust. He had walked into houses like this before, homes collapsing from the inside out, not because people were cruel, but because the world had taken more from them than they could bear. He gently placed his hand on Mia's shoulder. I'm right here. We'll take it slow. Bravo stepped ahead up the porch, sniffing the threshold with careful, deliberate motions. His tail lowered. His body stiffened faintly, not in aggression, but in the alert tension of a dog, sensing emotional wreckage rather than danger. The door creaked open before they could knock. Ethan Turner stood in the frame. He was in his early 40s, but exhaustion had carved him into someone older. His dark brown hair, streaked with gray, hung messily just above his eyes. His cheekbones were sharp, not from fitness, but from skipped meals and forgotten routines. Faint stubble shadowed his jaw, uneven and unmanaged. He wore a loose gray t-shirt and old flannel jacket, both wrinkled, with a faint smell of whiskey clinging to the fabric. His eyes, green like Mia's but clouded, lifted toward Dylan first, then slowly, painfully, toward his daughter. For a moment, something ancient and tender flickered in those eyes. Then it shattered. Mia, he whispered, the name cracking in his throat. Mia stepped forward with a small, hopeful smile, one carefully stitched together over months. Daddy, this is... But Ethan's expression crumpled before she could finish. Tears swelled along the lower rims of his eyes, unfallen but burning. He reached out a hand, then dropped it helplessly, as if he no longer remembered how to offer comfort. You look like her, he murmured, voice slurred from earlier drinking. Every time you look at me, it's like she's standing right there. And it hurts, Mia. It hurts too much. Mia's shoulders folded inward immediately. Her head lowered. She clasped her hands behind her back, a posture Dylan recognized, one of children trying to make themselves small when they think they caused pain. She whispered, I'm sorry. Those two words, so soft, so automatic, hit Dylan like a punch to the sternum. He stepped half a step forward. Ethan blinked and finally seemed to register the presence of a stranger, and the massive German shepherd now sitting protectively in front of Mia. Ethan's gaze flicked from Bravo to Dylan, confusion settling over him. Who are you? My name's Dylan, he answered evenly. I'm a former Marine. Mia invited me to her school today for Hero Day. He gestured gently to Mia. She didn't want to go alone. Ethan looked at his daughter again. His breath trembled. A mix of shame, grief, and guilt swirled chaotically in his expression. You didn't need to do that. I should have been there. He rubbed his eyes roughly. I'm sorry, baby. He broke off and turned away, bracing one hand against the wall as if the weight inside him was physically crushing his chest. Bravo let out a low, mournful whine. He stepped toward Ethan and gently nudged his leg. The gesture was soft, almost human, one of recognition, one of sensing a heart that was breaking in silence. The dog pressed his head lightly against Ethan's knee. Ethan froze. Slowly, he looked down at Bravo, eyes widening with stunned disbelief. Why is he doing that? He whispered. Because he senses pain, Dylan said softly. Especially the kind no one talks about. Ethan suddenly stumbled back from the wall, not because he lost balance, but because he saw something, someone, that wasn't there. his gaze locked on the kitchen door, his breath hitching like he had been struck. "Sarah," he whispered into the empty air, reaching forward with trembling fingers. There was nothing but dust dancing through a sunbeam. But for a moment, even Bravo turned his head and stared at that doorway, ears flicking upward, sensing a shift neither man could name. The moment passed as quickly as it had arrived. Ethan wiped his face, embarrassed. "Sorry, I see her sometimes. In the corners, in the things I should have done differently." Mia stepped closer, timidly tugging on his jacket. "Daddy, I didn't mean to make you sad." "It's not your fault," Ethan said instantly, but his voice cracked again, betraying the truth he hadn't been able to accept. "You didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who—" He swallowed tightly. "I don't know how to be a father without her." Dylan recognized that look. The battlefield had carved similar emptiness into men he had served beside. Men who returned home with invisible wounds. Men who didn't know how to heal. He crouched to be at Mia's level. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "your dad isn't angry at you. He's hurting because he loved your mom so much. But you didn't take her away. You're the reason her love still lives here." The words hit Ethan harder than Mia. He turned away quickly to hide the tears now slipping down his cheeks. Dylan rose slowly, his voice steady with the conviction of someone who had once needed saving too. "Don't push her away anymore. She needs you. And you need her. Whether you can see that yet or not." Ethan's shoulders trembled. He didn't respond. He didn't argue. He simply stood there, breathing hard, absorbing the truth that hurt more than any blame. As the evening light deepened, Dylan guided Mia to the door. Bravo stayed beside her flawlessly, eyes soft and protective. Before leaving, Dylan paused and looked at Ethan one last time. "I won't let her face this alone. Not anymore." Ethan didn't speak, but the way his hands shook, the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes lingered on Mia, told Dylan everything. He wasn't a bad father, just a broken one. And broken things, Dylan knew, could still be mended. "If this chapter gave you hope," Dylan whispered as they stepped into the golden evening, "remember to like, comment, and subscribe. God still restores families, even the ones fading at the edges." The days following Hero Day settled into a strange stillness around the Turner home. One that felt as if the entire house had been holding its breath for years and only now realized someone might finally notice. Dylan Hart found himself thinking about Mia more often than he expected. He thought about the quiet way she apologized for things that weren't her fault, the way her smile flickered like a candle fighting to stay lit, and the way Bravo, his steady companion, had begun following her with a focus he rarely showed even during his service days. Something inside Dylan, something he'd kept locked behind years of discipline, kept pushing him back toward her world, as if he were meant to stand between her and whatever shadows lingered there. That afternoon, he returned to the Turner neighborhood with Bravo trotting beside him, the dog's bright broken arrow chest marking catching the afternoon light. The air smelled faintly of spring, with the rustle of budding leaves carrying the soft hum of distant lawnmowers. But underneath that was another scent, an older one, of grief that had soaked into the Turner home like dampness in the walls. As Dylan approached the front yard, he noticed Mrs. Hollis, the elderly neighbor from next door, sweeping her porch. She was a slender woman in her 70s, with silver hair braided neatly down her back and soft brown eyes framed by deep wrinkles that suggested a lifetime of tending others. She paused when she saw Dylan and offered a faint smile. "You must be the Marine Mia brought to Hero Day." "Yes, ma'am," Dylan replied politely. Bravo sniffed the air, then dipped his head respectfully. He always did that with older women, ever since their search and rescue training. Mrs. Hollis leaned her elbows on her porch railing, watching him with a gaze both kind and heavy. "You're checking on them, aren't you?" "I am," Dylan said simply. "I just want to make sure they're okay." She exhaled slowly, her eyes softening with a sadness that belonged to people who had witnessed too much. They used to be the happiest family on this street. She set her broom aside and walked down the few wooden steps of her porch. I knew Sarah well. She was a nurse at Willow Bend Clinic, always smiling, always caring too much. She was small, thin, with light brown hair she wore in a bun, skin like porcelain, but strong as oak when it came to people she loved, especially Ethan and Mia. Dylan listened quietly. Mrs. Hollis stared toward the Turner house as if seeing a different time. Ethan adored her, a strong man, tall, broad-shouldered, always helping neighbors fix fences or unload groceries, never without a laugh or a warm greeting. I remember him carrying Mia on his shoulders, both of them giggling so hard the birds flew away. Bravo let out a soft sigh at her feet, as if absorbing the warmth of the memory. But after Sarah died, Mrs. Hollis's voice thinned. It was like someone reached inside him and crushed whatever kept him alive. He tried for the first year. He really did. But grief changes shape over time. For Ethan, it became something that swallowed him whole. Her eyes glistened. He stopped eating, stopped working, stopped seeing anything except the loss of her. And when he looked at Mia, he saw the last seconds of Sarah's life, not the child who needed him. Dylan felt that truth settle in, heavy and cold. He never meant to hurt her, Mrs. Hollis whispered. He just didn't know how to stay alive without Sarah. Mrs. Hollis hesitated, looking around as if ensuring the wind itself wasn't listening. There was one night, months ago. Ethan had drunk too much. He fell on the front steps, right there, couldn't get up. Her eyes tightened with pain. And that little girl, so tiny she could hardly lift anything heavier than her backpack, pulled him inside by his jacket. She cried the whole time, begging him to wake up. But no one else helped. No one knew. No one came. She looked directly at Dylan. "You're the first person who seems able to see them both. Really see them." Dylan swallowed the sting of emotion that rose like a tide in his chest. He thanked Mrs. Hollis, then stepped toward the Turner home. The front door was slightly ajar. Bravo stiffened immediately, ears shooting up, nose twitching. Dylan pushed the door gently, every instinct in him flipping into alert mode. Inside, he found Ethan Turner sitting at the kitchen table, his head bowed into his hands. The afternoon light filtered through half-closed blinds, casting long stripes of shadow across the room. There were no beer cans, not today. But the heaviness in the room was a fog that no amount of sunlight could erase. Ethan looked thinner than before, dark circles underlining eyes that were losing their color. His hands trembled lightly, rubbing over his forehead and jaw. He lifted his gaze when he sensed Dylan's presence. "I didn't hear you knock," Ethan muttered. His voice was raspy, worn out. "Door must have drifted open." Dylan nodded but didn't comment. Bravo approached slowly, tail low, head soft as he nudged Ethan's knee. Ethan exhaled a shaking breath and stroked the dog's head with trembling fingers. "I don't know why he likes me," he whispered. "I've done nothing to deserve it." "He senses more than what you think," Dylan said. "Pain, fear, hope." He paused. "Especially hope." Ethan laughed weakly, though it wasn't really a laugh, more A cracked exhale. Hope? I lost that when Sarah died. You didn't lose it, Dylan said quietly. You buried it. Ethan's eyes tightened and he sank further into the chair. I loved her, Dylan, more than I knew a person could love. And when she died, it was like the world went silent. He swallowed hard. And I failed Mia. I've failed her every day since. Dylan leaned against the counter, arms crossed lightly, then stopped failing her. Ethan's head snapped up, hurt flickering across his face. Dylan didn't soften the words, though his voice remained calm. She's still here. She's still hoping. She still wants her father. He pointed toward the living room where Mia's small shoes rested by the door. But she won't wait forever. Ethan's breath quivered. She looks like Sarah. Every time she smiles, every tilt of her head. It's like Sarah is right there, dying all over again. And every time you turn away, Dylan said, you teach her that she doesn't deserve to be loved. Ethan flinched, but he didn't deny it. Bravo stepped closer, touching his nose softly to Ethan's hand. It broke something inside the man. His shoulders collapsed inward like a structure finally giving way under too much weight. I don't want to lose her, Ethan whispered. I've just been so lost. Dylan stepped forward. Then let someone help you find your way back. Outside the window, Mia returned from visiting Mrs. Hollis. Her footsteps soft, her posture timid but searching. When she stepped inside and saw both men looking at her, she froze, uncertain. Ethan stood, his voice cracked. Mia, I'm sorry. She didn't run to him, but she didn't run away either. It was the beginning of something fragile, something that needed protecting. And Dylan knew, without hesitation, that he would stand guard over this beginning for as long as it took. If this story touched your heart today, he murmured softly to the invisible listeners beyond the scene, please like, comment, and subscribe. God's miracles often start in the homes we're afraid to enter. Dylan Hart began showing up at the Turner home more often. Not in a way that intruded, but in a way that gently filled the silent spaces that had shaped Mia's world for too long. It started with small things. Helping her with a handful of worksheets she brought home from school, showing her how to stay aware of her surroundings without fear, and bringing Bravo over whenever he sensed Mia needed a steady heartbeat beside her. The girl who once moved through rooms like a shadow now slowly began stepping into the light again. She talked more, laughed softly, even teased Bravo when he tried to steal her socks or nudge her hand to get another treat. For the first time in years, there was warmth flickering in the Turner household. A warmth Ethan Turner watched from the periphery, as if he feared stepping closer might extinguish it. Ethan was a tall man, broader than Dylan remembered, though his posture had curved inward with grief until it seemed his shoulders carried every regret he had ever spoken or swallowed. His black hair, once thick and carefully cut, now grew uneven with strands of gray sneaking through, matching the dark stubble around his jaw. Sometimes he lingered in the hallway longer than he realized, watching Mia read a book while leaning against Bravo, her fingers buried in the dog's sable fur. Other times he stood at the kitchen doorway while Dylan explained math problems or tied Mia's shoelaces with patient hands. Each time, a storm of longing passed through Ethan's eyes. Longing, fear, shame, and a love so bruised it barely recognized itself. Dylan noticed all of it. He didn't push. He didn't force. Healing, he understood, never responded to commands. One evening, as the sky dimmed into a soft indigo and crickets began scratching their nighttime rhythm, Dylan sat on the front steps with Ethan. Mia had fallen asleep in the living room, curled against Bravo's side like a small bird seeking heat. The porch light flickered above them, illuminating Ethan's face in uneven lines. "You stay late these days," Ethan said quietly, though not accusingly. "I stay where I'm needed," Dylan replied. Ethan looked down at his hands, fingers twitching with an anxious habit he couldn't break. "I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't even know if I deserve another chance." Dylan rested his forearms on his knees. "When I left the Marines, I swore I'd never let myself get close to anyone again. Too much loss, too many ghosts. But one day, a chaplain told me something that stuck." He glanced sideways. "He said God can return what life took away, but only if we're willing to stand back up and meet him halfway." Ethan clenched his jaw, swallowing the lump that rose in his throat. "What if I don't know how?" "Then you learn," Dylan said gently. "For Mia's sake and for yours." As if sensing the shift in their conversation, Bravo suddenly looked up from where he lay beside Mia through the screen door. His ears perked, his head tilted slightly to the right, his way of alerting Dylan when feelings ran deeper than words. He stood, padded onto the porch, and sat directly in front of Ethan. Slowly, deliberately, he rested his large head on Ethan's knee. It wasn't comfort alone. It was something almost symbolic, like a silent vote of faith from a creature who could smell pain, fear, and truth better than any human. Ethan froze, breath catching, and his eyes glossed with tears. He didn't blink away. That simple gesture from the dog broke something open inside him. Something old, something buried, something he'd been terrified to face. Ethan pressed a hand over his eyes, shoulders shaking. "I loved Sarah more than anything," he whispered. She was small, but she filled every room she walked into. Warm brown hair, soft voice. She was the kind of woman who made you feel like you belonged in the world just by looking at you. And when she died, when that car hit, everything inside me shattered. All I could see was Mia standing in the street where Sarah pushed her away from the impact. Every time I look at her, I see the last breath Sarah took. Dylan let him speak. Grief was a river that needed release before it could ever be crossed. I told myself I was distancing myself to protect her, Ethan continued, voice raw. But all I did was abandon the last piece of Sarah I had left. She didn't abandon you, Dylan said softly. She gave everything she had to save your daughter. And you're punishing yourself for surviving something she chose. Ethan lowered his hands. His eyes were red, but there was clarity there, heavy and trembling, but real. "I don't know if I can fix this," he murmured. "You don't fix it alone," Dylan replied. "You start by being present, by choosing her, every day, even if it hurts." Inside, Mia stirred in her sleep, her hand tightening around a tuft of Bravo's fur through the screen door. The dog glanced back at her, then turned to Ethan with a gaze that held neither pity nor judgment. Only expectation, as if telling him, "This is your moment. Take it." Ethan inhaled deeply and nodded once, slowly, as if making an oath in his chest. "I want to try." "That's all she wants," Dylan said. They sat quietly for a while longer, listening to night settle around them. It wasn't a perfect peace, but it was a beginning, a fragile first step out of years of pain. And beginnings, Dylan knew, mattered more than most people realized. As the porch light flickered softly overhead, Dylan whispered, almost to himself, "If you believe healing can happen, if you believe God still writes new beginnings, please like, comment, and subscribe." Miracles often start as whispers. Ethan Turner woke before sunrise for the first time in years. Not because a nightmare pulled him from sleep, and not because he stumbled drunkenly from the sofa searching for something to numb himself with. He woke because a strange quiet had settled inside him. A quiet that didn't feel like emptiness, but something closer to clarity. Light seeped through the blinds in thin strips, brushing against the wooden floor. Ethan sat up slowly, rubbing his face with hands roughened by work he no longer did. His head hurt, but not from alcohol. It hurt from the weight of everything he had finally admitted the night before. He stood, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the counter. Empty bottles lined the wall like an accusation, their glassy surfaces reflecting the man he had become. A man he barely recognized. A man he knew his wife, Sarah, would never have wanted him to be. With a long, trembling exhale, Ethan opened a trash bag and, one by one, began sliding the bottles inside. The clinks echoed like tiny funerals. He didn't stop until every last bottle was gone. Then he wiped the counter, then the table, then the sink. When he was done, the house felt less like a tomb. On the living room shelf, dust clung to a framed photo turned face down years ago. Ethan hesitated, fingers hovering above it. When he finally lifted the frame, Sarah's smiling face greeted him, light brown hair curled behind her ears, soft eyes full of warmth. She held a much younger Mia in her lap, the girl around 3 years old, both of them laughing at something the camera hadn't captured. Ethan's throat tightened so violently he had to grip the shelf to stay upright. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he didn't know which one of them he was speaking to. He cleaned the glass gently with the hem of his shirt, then placed the picture upright on the mantel. That single act, small as it was, shifted the air of the entire house. Down the hallway, Mia stirred. Ethan walked slowly toward her room, stopping at the doorway. The little girl was sitting on the floor tying her shoes, her backpack beside her. Her hair was brushed neatly, but she still wore that habitual tension in her shoulders, like she was preparing for the day to hurt her. Bravo lay beside her, chin on her toes, his calm golden brown eyes tracking every movement. Bravo looked up at Ethan first. His ears twitched, his gaze sharpened, not wary, but waiting. "Morning," Ethan said softly. Mia froze. Her small hands trembled around her laces. She lifted her head, expecting the tone she'd grown used to, cold, distant. A man who loved her, but couldn't bear to look at her. But that wasn't the voice she heard. Ethan knelt slowly so his eyes were level with hers. His voice cracked as he said, "I need to tell you something." Mia swallowed hard. Am I in trouble?" "No." Ethan shook his head instantly. "No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. I'm the one who's been wrong." Tears stung his eyes when he saw the confusion on her face, the way she instinctively braced herself for pain that wasn't coming. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. For not being here. For not holding you. For making you feel unloved. You didn't do anything wrong. You never did." His breath shook. "And your mom, she didn't die because of you. She died saving you. Because she loved you more than her own life." Mia covered her mouth with trembling fingers. A sob broke free. She launched forward, her small arms wrapping around his neck with a desperation that shattered him. Ethan held her the way he should have held her all along. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost of Sarah. She felt like herself, his daughter, his little girl. Bravo pressed his head gently against both of them, letting out a low, warm rumble that felt like a blessing. As father and daughter embraced, Bravo suddenly turned his head toward the mantel. His ears rose, posture alert but not tense. He stared directly at the newly upright photo of Sarah. Something in his gaze softened, his tail lowered, and he let out a quiet sound that almost resembled a sigh. Mia pulled back just enough to follow his eyes, and when she saw the picture displayed again, she gasped. Ethan hadn't meant for it to be seen so soon, but the way Mia's face lit up, with surprise, recognition, and aching happiness, told him he'd done the right thing. For a moment, it felt as if Sarah herself had stepped into the room, unseen but present, watching her family begin to mend. That afternoon, Dylan arrived, knocking gently before stepping inside. His Marine posture softened when he saw Ethan standing upright, sober, hair combed back, wearing a clean shirt instead of the crumpled clothes he'd lived in for months. The difference was unmistakable. "I need your help," Ethan said, voice steadier than it had been in years. "I want to get better. I want to learn how to be her dad again." Dylan nodded. "Then we start small, one day at a time." Ethan exhaled shakily. "One day at a time." Bravo nudged his leg again, as if signing off on the agreement. At school, changes unfolded too. Brandon, the boy who had tormented Mia, returned subdued. His parents, called in after Hero Day, now attended mandatory counseling sessions with him. Brandon was a stocky boy, with sandy hair often shoved under a baseball cap, freckles across his nose, and a sharp tongue he used as a shield more than a weapon. When he passed Mia in the hallway, he didn't sneer. He didn't whisper. He just looked away, almost embarrassed. Kids noticed. And when Mia sat alone at recess, two girls, Ari and Lila, quiet children with gentle faces, walked over and asked if they could sit with her. She nodded shyly. It wasn't a full friendship yet, but it was a beginning. That evening, Mia giggled loudly for the first time in what felt like forever when Ethan tried to cook dinner and accidentally burned the toast twice. He groaned dramatically. She laughed until her eyes squinted. Dylan stood near the counter, arms crossed, a rare smile pulling at his lips. Bravo lay under the table, tail thumping lazily. The broken arrow marking on his chest caught the warm kitchen light like a small flame. For once, the Turner home felt alive. As night settled outside and the world quieted into soft shadows, Dylan whispered gently, "If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Miracles happen when broken things begin to heal." The day of the school meeting arrived with a sky that couldn't quite decide if it wanted to be gray or golden. A thin veil of cloud softened the afternoon sun, casting a gentle light over Willow Bend Elementary. Parents filtered onto campus in small clusters, some in work uniforms, some in pressed shirts, others carrying the weary look of long weeks and short nights. Among them, walking a little slower than the rest, was Ethan Turner. He wore a light blue button-up shirt that still had faint, stubborn wrinkles, dark jeans, and shoes he had taken the time to polish. His shoulders were still a little hunched from years of grief, but his head was higher, his eyes clearer. He looked like a man who had decided to show up for his life again, even if he still wasn't sure he deserved the chance. At his side walked Mia in her pink dress and beige cardigan, clutching his hand so tightly that her knuckles blanched. On her other side walked Dylan Hart, the tall ex-Marine with storm-gray blue eyes and sun-browned skin, wearing his flannel and boots, carrying himself with the calm of someone who had known chaos and chosen peace. Between them padded Bravo, the 4-year-old German shepherd whose sable black and gray coat seemed to catch every stray beam of light. The bright, broken arrow marking on his chest matched the strange, quiet determination in his eyes. He walked exactly between father and daughter, shoulder brushing Ethan's leg, tail occasionally tapping Mia's calf, as if he were physically bridging a gap that had taken years to name. Inside the school, the air shimmered with a low hum of voices, the squeak of sneakers on linoleum, and the faint smell of crayons and disinfectant. The classroom was already half full when they entered. Parents sitting at small desks, children perched on chairs too big or too small for them, teachers circulating with clipboards and practiced smiles. Mrs. Peterson looked up from a stack of papers and froze for half a second when she saw Ethan in the doorway. She had seen him before, stumbling, distant, eyes unfocused. But this wasn't the same man. This was someone who had washed his face, combed his hair, and chosen to stand beside his daughter in public. Her eyes flickered to Mia and the way the little girl held his hand, then to Dylan, and then to Bravo, who sat with perfect posture near the front row, observing everything with quiet intensity. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice warm. "I'm glad you could make it." Ethan cleared his throat. "Me too," he replied, and for once, he meant it. They took seats near the front. Mia stayed pressed close to Ethan, her small fingers curling around the sleeve of his shirt as if afraid he might disappear if she blinked. Dylan sat beside them, broad shoulders taking up more space than the tiny chair allowed. But he didn't seem to mind. Bravo lay at Mia's feet, head resting across her shoes, his golden brown eyes scanning the room steadily. A few parents exchanged curious glances, some whispering about the dog, others nodding respectfully at Dylan's unmistakable military bearing. The meeting began with the usual announcements, test scores, upcoming events. But everyone in that room, whether they knew it or not, was waiting for the quieter story playing out in the front row. When Mrs. Peterson asked if any parent wanted to share something about what heroism and family meant to them, a follow-up to Hero Day, Ethan's hands went cold. His heart pounded against his ribs. He felt Mia look at him, hope and fear swirling in her green eyes. He could have stayed seated. He could have let the moment pass. But then he felt a gentle weight on his foot. Bravo had shifted, placing one paw lightly over Ethan's shoe, gaze lifting to meet his. There was no way to explain how a dog's stare could speak, but in that moment, it did. "Get up. She needs this. So do you." Ethan rose slowly. He could feel the room's attention turn toward him, the way he used to feel enemy eyes watching from shadows during better days. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to meet the students' and parents' gazes. "My name is Ethan Turner," he began, voice rough. "I'm Mia's dad." The words themselves were an act of courage. He hadn't said them out loud like that, with that much ownership, in a long time. "My wife, Sarah, was a nurse," he continued. "Small, kind, stubborn in the best way. She believed in taking care of people, even when it cost her. A few years ago, she pushed our daughter out of the way of a car. She saved Mia's life, and she lost hers." A quiet fell over the room that was different from the earlier hush at announcements. This quiet carried weight. Ethan swallowed. "I didn't know how to live with that. So I did the worst thing a father can do. I started disappearing while still being alive. I looked at my daughter and saw the moment I lost my wife instead of seeing the miracle I still had." He glanced back at Mia. Her eyes shone, but she didn't look away. He gripped the back of the chair in front of him to steady himself. But a little girl can only carry so much blame that isn't hers. And a father can only run from the truth for so long. The truth is, Sarah didn't die because of Mia. She died because she loved our daughter more than her own breath. If I keep punishing myself by pushing Mia away, then I'm throwing away the very thing my wife gave her life to protect. He exhaled shakily. So I'm trying to learn how to be a father again. Slowly, imperfectly. I don't have all the answers. But I know this. My daughter is not the cause of my pain. She is the reason there is still something worth healing for." Mia stood up impulsively and grabbed his hand, her small fingers sliding into his palm. She pressed herself against his side, resting her head against his arm. He looked down at her, eyes filling with tears that finally spilled over. The class watched as father and daughter stood together, trembling, imperfect, but united. In the second row, Brandon shifted in his seat. The stocky boy with sandy hair and freckles, once so quick with cruel jokes, now looked smaller than usual. His usual cocky posture had been replaced by something tighter, as if he were trying to disappear into his hoodie. The school counselor, Mrs. Reynolds, a woman in her early 50s with dark curls streaked with gray and gentle hazel eyes, watched him carefully from the back. She'd been meeting with him for weeks, peeling back layers of anger to find the hurt beneath. Suddenly, Brandon stood up, his voice cracked as he spoke. "Mia," he called softly. Every head turned. Mia stiffened, fingers tightening on her father's sleeve. "I was really mean to you," Brandon said. "I said horrible stuff about your mom, about you being alone. I thought it made me strong to pick on someone who was hurting. But I was wrong." He swallowed, face flushing deep red. "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Mrs. Peterson, eyes shimmering, whispered, "Thank you, Brandon." The room exhaled as one. Faith, in that instant, didn't feel like something distant or lofty. It felt like a boy choosing to repent in front of his classmates. Later, as the meeting wound down and parents began to talk quietly among themselves, Mia found herself surrounded by classmates who no longer looked at her with curiosity or cruelty, but with respect. Ari and Lila stood on either side of her, smiling shyly, asking about Bravo, about her favorite books, about whether she would sit with them at lunch. Mia's smile, once cautious and fragile, now spread slowly but fully across her face, reaching her eyes. It wasn't the smile of a child pretending everything was okay. It was the smile of someone who had finally been told the truth, that she was loved, that she wasn't to blame, that she belonged. Dylan watched all of it from the back of the room, leaning against the wall, arms crossed loosely. He felt something move inside his chest, something old and familiar that he'd buried under routine and survival. The belief that families, even shattered ones, could be pieced back together. He had seen too many homes destroyed by war, by addiction, by secrets, to believe easily in second chances. But watching Ethan stand tall beside his daughter, watching Brandon confess in front of everyone, watching Bravo calmly guard the little girl he'd chosen as his human, it stirred something like faith. Not loud, not flashy, just steady, quiet, real. As people started to leave, Ethan turned to Dylan. The fluorescent lights of the classroom flickered slightly overhead, but there was nothing unsteady about the gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't just save her," he said, voice low, thick with emotion. "You saved me too." Dylan shook his head. "You did the hard part," he replied. "You chose to come back." Ethan's lip trembled into a half smile. "I wouldn't have known how without you." Bravo, as if unable to let the moment pass unmarked, let out one clear, sharp bark. Not aggressive, not startled, just one firm, echoing note that bounced off the classroom walls like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, painful sentence. A few kids laughed. Mia reached down and scratched behind his ear. "That's Bravo's way of saying amen," Dylan murmured, and Ethan huffed a wet laugh, wiping his eyes. They left the school together as the sun finally broke fully through the clouds. The parking lot glowed with late afternoon gold, the kind of light that made even cracked asphalt look almost beautiful. Mia walked between Ethan and Dylan, one hand in each of theirs. Bravo trotted slightly ahead, leading the way toward the gate, his tail swaying in an easy rhythm. They weren't a perfect family. There were still nights ahead that would hurt, memories that would sting, habits that would be hard to break. But as the four of them walked under the slanting sunlight, man, child, friend, and dog, it was hard not to feel like heaven itself had leaned a little closer, not to erase the past, but to redeem it. They didn't have the family they once did, but they had the family God had given back to them. And somewhere in that quiet, Dylan's voice seemed to reach beyond the scene itself. If this story of healing and second chances touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes, God's greatest miracles are the families He stitches back together when everyone else has given up.